Hey everyone, so this isn't as much a beginner's guide so much as a weapon breakdown, and I'm sorry for that, but there's a reason. So, unfortunately, this is not a very easy weapon to build around. Like, the build is pretty simple, but it requires a lot of stats before it really gets going. If you want to put in the time and effort to get the build rolling, hey, then you can start with it. If you just want to start with the weapon, go ahead, but it's going to be tough. Like, we're looking at the katana, and honestly, I think you're better off starting with a different build, like an axe or an odachi build, and then using a book of reincarnation to change it after you kill an era, which you have to kill him to get a book of reincarnation because you buy it from the blacksmith. But ultimately, you're pretty much gonna have to kill an era before you have enough stats to really make the build work, because you need significant investment to really get good damage with the katana, and in Nioh, damage is everything. But you also don't want to be getting staggered, and you want to be somewhat tanky, so you're going to need some stamina and strength because you'll need your armor's stats. Unless you get really lucky with drops, it's going to take a lot of investment to really make the weapon function. So these are things to keep in mind. You don't actually need a lot of stamina or strength to really get the armor you need, but you still have to reach the Viper's Sanctum if you don't want to put in the work with stamina or strength. I'll get into that during the breakdown. So, we should actually start talking about the weapon, like what it can do. The katana is a highly versatile weapon once you get it rolling that focuses on having such variable effects, like abilities, when you change the stance. I don't know what's up today. I'm not dodging a direction I'm pressing the buttons for. I don't know what's up this morning. So, the katana, in every stance, it has a very different move set and stats, and each one is good in a different situation. Low stance is really, really fast and can hit multiple times, but it doesn't hit very hard. Mid stance. Mid stance has one of the most powerful moves in any game, the thrust, as well as the ability to keep enemies somewhat at a distance between the thrust and this. And as per usual, the moves for running and rolling are not too great. Oh yeah, I didn't show. Oh, come on. Can you do a roll, please? He doesn't want to roll, does he? Maybe I need to be in a fight to roll. Yeah, he doesn't want to roll. In low stance, he doesn't want to roll, but those moves are ultimately pretty bad. But my favorite, honestly, is high stance, because even though its move set its basic moveset is pretty weak. It gets better. As you upgrade your skills, the moveset gets better, and it does a lot of damage. So there really isn't a bad stance with the katana, and there isn't a best stance. There's no worst or best stance. I guess you could call the mid stance the worst one because it has the worst advantage, but just having easy to use thrusting can come up, and it's good to have. It also has a couple parries in there, but it's not like the Odachi that can parry yokai. Its build is pretty good. You're basically upgrading some strength, but only enough to use your gear's stats, its effects. You're upgrading stamina, and your damage stat is heart, which is amazing. Getting damage off, having your primary scaling be heart means every time you go to upgrade damage, you're upgrading your ki as well. So that's really, really good. It's still not an easy weapon type to use. At least not early on. Because, like I said before, it takes some investment to really be useful. You can use it without much investment, you're just not going to be very strong. The katana's real strength comes in its versatility. It's honestly the most versatile weapon in the game, I believe, due to its just pure just its very variable moveset that allows you to have an advantage in a lot of different situations. It's also a very ki-centered weapon, which having a weapon that is built around ki it's really quite an amazing thing. But a Master Swordsman build is not the easiest thing. If you're really a katana fan, like if you want to start the game with katana, do the dual swords or the Odachi, I say. At least to start. If you want to switch to the versatility king, the katana, after you kill an era, be my guest. But honestly, use it if you want from the beginning, but you're gonna struggle. Okay? I don't think... What level am I right now, anyways? That's gonna matter with what I'm about to say. I'm level 41, so I wouldn't say a katana build is going to be very effective before like level 30 to 35. Because you need a pretty good chunk of heart, and you either need stamina or a very specific set. So you can be pretty tanky and have some toughness. So, what set would allow you to use the weapon without too much stamina early game? Well, that would be the set I'm wearing right now, the Brawler Set. And therein lies why you cannot make this build effective without stamina before the Viper Sanctum. The Brawler Set is very difficult to come by until you do the Viper Sanctum, and before the Viper Sanctum, the only places you can get it are the side missions you unlock after killing an Nioh. So basically, no matter what, the build is not going to be too strong until after you kill an Nioh, because you're also probably not going to be very high level until you've killed an Nioh. That's just how it is. The other thing is a Nioh unlocks a lot of skills you wouldn't have previously. So unfortunately, the Katana is very centered around... The build doesn't really start until you have killed an Nioh, who is the first real enemy you will fight. In all the times I have played the first few levels, because I can never pick a build, a Nioh has been the second worst enemy I've ever fought. The worst being Yatsu no Kami, who I've only ever beaten with ninjutsu. I'm not kidding. My only wins against Yatsu no Kami were by hucking just shuriken after shuriken and kunai after kunai at it. That's the only way I've ever beaten that boss. But in Nioh, prepare to get your butt kicked because he's the first real enemy. Which is kind of a big reason I don't suggest starting with the Katana, because it's going to be difficult until you have killed an Nioh. And even though Heart does boost your overall fire resistance, the weapon itself very much struggles with an Nioh. Which, yeah, that's problematic. But yeah, the pressure you can put on with a katana is pretty strong. But you really do have to know what you're doing. You have to be willing to switch stances for different situations. And there are ways to just chain attack after attack by switching stance. I just don't know how to do that. But even so, each stance has its own set of advantages that you can take advantage of in different situations. And these situations aren't just variable from enemy to enemy. The situations where changing the stance could be useful can vary from boss phase to boss phase. It can literally vary that much. For example, say you are fighting Yatsu no Kami. In the first phase, well, technically first phase, which would be when you're not in the Dark Realm, you would want high stance to do as much damage as possible. But when you enter the Dark Realm, because you're fighting her plus the snakes that you didn't kill, when it wasn't the Dark Realm, and your key recovery will be significantly lower, then low stance will probably be best. But there's also things like if you're fighting a turtle, which most gamers know what a turtle is, but for those who don't know, a turtle is an enemy that just blocks all day long. If you're facing an enemy that is just doing nothing but blocking, you want high stance. High stance is going to allow you to blow through their guard and keep hitting them until you break their ki and you can hit them hard. So, big advantages and disadvantages to the katana. Well, its only real disadvantage is it's not very good at any one thing. In any one situation, it's not going to be as good as a weapon that excels in that situation. But it does well in almost every situation. Its range, of course, is a problem. But for a melee weapon, its range isn't that bad. There are shorter melees. And the build scales your bow. Heart scales the bow. So range isn't a huge issue. It's very difficult to get going with. You'll be fine once you get the build rolling. But until you get the Brawler Set, or you have, I think, like 20, 25 stamina, you're not going to be overly tanky. The thing with the Brawler Set is, you see how where it's green, where I have toughness, you see a green 140? That means I have a B in toughness. A is the highest, but the Brawler Set is also very, very light. So just take the Curious, for instance. Do I have a Curious of it? I do not. There's one. So, the helmet. With the helmet for the Brawler Set, I have 56.5. If I swap just the helmet, oh, that's not a huge difference. Okay, so just upping the torso, which this difference in weight is not much for a torso piece, puts me at a C in agility, which is the Nioh equivalent of fat rolling. You don't want that. So without upgrading stamina, the Brawler Set is your most tanky option. And it provides really good defense. Like, this is very good defense, and it also has ki recovery on unscathed. It boosts that, which what this means is your ki recovery, how fast your ki will come back, will be increased while you are at max health. And with the full set, it builds up to be, I think, about like 10%, which is pretty significant considering you're rolling with heart. That's a pretty significant increase, and not to be taken lightly. It's a good set, but the most consistent place to grind for it is the Viper's Sanctum, which is the third main mission. Which means you've got to kill an era. As for what to really do with the build, like I keep saying, it's very, very simple. You want defense and damage. The weapon covers most other cases. Therefore, the only stats you really need on this build are heart and stamina. That being said, there is still the matter of activating your armor's effects, which later on you will get just way better effects. Because your effects will be significantly better, you're going to want to activate them. So to that extent, you'll want to put a couple points into strength, but only enough points that you can actually use the effects. You don't want to go more than that on strength, because it does scale your weapon, but it's not your primary scaling, and it doesn't do much other than activate your armor's abilities. So you're better off just getting enough strength and not trying to scale your weapon off of it. There really isn't a good secondary weapon to go with the katana. If you want to have the option of something else, do a hammer or an axe. Because hammers and axes scale with stamina. It's the best option, but you're not going to be upgrading your stamina nearly as much as your heart, and unfortunately there is no other weapon where heart is your primary scaling. So ultimately there isn't a second weapon that really works on a katana build too well. You could do the odachi, I guess, since even because its scaling is stamina, strength, and heart. So you won't ever upgrade anything that doesn't scale it, but it does have a primary scaling of strength, just that you're going to be upgrading the least. So there really isn't a good secondary to go with the katana. More when I see someone using two weapons, and the way I see it as well, is when using a katana, is the katana is the secondary. Your secondary typically isn't going to do as much damage. It's there for situations where your main doesn't really help. Which, that's the other thing. The katana doesn't have much need for a secondary weapon because it's pretty good in most situations. The only situation I'd say you may need something else is a melt or be melted enemy, which in that case the dual swords are likely your best bet. And the other situation is when you're fighting something you need to get in close, but not too close, in which case the odachi is your best bet. Both these weapons scale with heart, but they aren't going to scale as well. So it really just comes down to personal preference, I guess. You wouldn't be using your secondary weapon all that often like you would with most builds, because there's just no real need for it. Now, when we go into skills, there's a couple you're really going to want. You're going to want sword ki, Three relentless skills are really useful, but you have to do you have to clear the mission Wave the Warrior Novice, which you don't unlock Wave the Warrior Novice until you kill an era. But what Relentless does is it increases your maximum ki by 30. It doesn't sound like a lot because it isn't, but it does help. If you're more going to be focused on mid stance, you're going to want first roll of thrusting. Just to boost the damage of your thrust attacks. In fact, it's just a good stat to have. I might as well get it. You could get Tachi Arts. A lot of the best skills for the katana are passive. But the problem is, with Tachi Arts, it's only going to affect the first hit you land on an enemy because it only boosts damage on enemies that are full health. So the second you hit your enemy, this turns off against them. That's something to keep in mind. I actually used this earlier when oh wait, no, not this. I used this earlier when showing the moves. It's just nice to have in high stance when you're facing a turtle, so you can hit them 3 times with the quick attack and then come back in with this attack, which will usually break their ki. Sword ki is very, very good. Especially once you kill an era and you can get the Sword of Celerity. I probably butchered that. Which allows you to go from sword ki into this whirlwind slash attack. Which just devastates ki. I haven't gotten it yet because I'm more fond of high stance. But kick is another really good move because you can just do a quick attack in low or mid stance and then kick them. But in low stance, I prefer this. It does huge health damage and some pretty significant ki damage. Which, that's one thing to keep in mind. Because the katana is, well, a sword, it's a bladed weapon, it's not going to do as much ki damage as a single hit from, like, a hammer or the tonfa. But most weapons in Nioh are not blunt. So that's something to keep in mind. Leaf Glide, I more got for access to other moves. It's not that good. It's just a parry. But Nioh parry timings are pretty small, and every weapon except the Odachi can only parry humans. Even that, I don't believe you can parry human bosses. So, well, not with the Odachi. With the Odachi, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure only generic human enemies can be parried with Leaf Glide, and all it really does is parry them. Turn away an attack. You're better off just blocking because you have the ki to withstand it. But yeah, Heaven Flash is really, really good. If you want to focus more on low stance and hitting enemies quick, Heaven Flash is going to be a really useful move for you. It can also provide some significant evasive maneuvers. Come on, Gaki. I'll show you Heaven Flash here. And then sword key you can use in any move, in any stance, but you just block and then press triangle. Then you can go into the other move I mentioned, the whirlwind like attack. Which what sword key does, really, is it just hits keys super freaking hard. Overall, the katana is a very good weapon, but it requires some investment to use. If you don't mind investing some time and effort, the katana, I feel, can be possibly the best weapon in the game, because it's not a, and I know I say because a lot, because it's not a very hindered weapon. It is versatile in most situations. It's not a weapon to be taken lightly unless you're in the first couple levels of the game. Which Viper's Sanctum isn't too far into the game. It's the third main mission, which is still the first region. But because you really got to kill Nioh, aka get to Viper's Sanctum, before the build really gets going too well, or grind for centuries to get enough stamina and heart for it to work. It's not that friendly to someone just starting out. And that's why this isn't really a beginner's guide, because as good as the weapon is, it's honestly the only weapon I would not recommend to a beginner. The only weapon. The other weapons can be complex to use, but the katana is just difficult to invest enough in right from the start. Anyways, that's how I see the katana. It's a good weapon once you get the investment going to really use it. But before that, it kinda sucks. See you all in the next video. Oh, and sorry about last week. YouTube was being a bud and crashing every 5 minutes, so I couldn't upload a video.